Okay, so this was a YouTube comment that was left on one of our YouTube videos. Last week we talked about this person. Their screen name is Shoftim, and they had commented that we bash the Talmud. And last week we commented and said, no, we don't bash the Talmud. We are all for the Talmud as long as it's put in its historical, grammatical place. That it can't be read back to Sinai. It can't even be read back into Yeshua's time. It is a late work in the 6th century, and so on and so forth. So this person responds and says, bash might have been too strong of a word. I guess the question arises, are the church fathers greater than Talmud scholars? I would actually really be interested to know what this person thinks, because I don't think that the answer is cut and dry. Greater how? What do you mean by greater? And which Talmud scholars and which church fathers are you talking about? You're lumping a lot of people in together. The church fathers, quote unquote church fathers, did great things for the community of faith, whether Messianics want to admit it or not. The fact that you believe today and that you have the Bible today in your hands is largely in part because of the church fathers. They helped carry the belief, and they helped work out many, many theological issues that much of the Messianic movement is trying, I apologize everyone, is trying to get rid of now. The whole...
We can't, you know what, it's hard for us to imagine what the world was like for those early fathers. The world they lived, remember, they were persecuted, a minority, until the 3rd century, actually the early 4th century.
Yeah.
And they were kicked out of the synagogues, not recognized by the Roman, because they didn't fit in the synagogue communities that had legal loopholes, that they didn't have to, those Jewish communities in the diaspora that had kind of negotiated some stability in that they didn't have to participate in Caesar worship. The Shabbats were protected. Their synagogue spaces was protected more or less. Early believers in Yeshua, once they were not welcome in synagogue communities, it's not like they just went and built a new community and could establish independence from Roman worship and stuff like that. They had all sorts of stuff to navigate, and it's easy now to look back and go, oh, they, and be critical of them without identifying their history.
Well, a lot of the church fathers, admittedly, were anti-Semitic. There's no doubt about it. There were some church fathers who were very anti-Semitic. They did not like...
Well, wait. I'm going to quibble.
Okay,
anti-Semitic is not the right word.
Okay. Who were not happy with the Jewish people. Or the synagogue, maybe, is what we should say.
But it's not even Jewish people at all, because a lot of those, there were Jewish communities that became believers. They were against the people that, what you could say, the Judaizers, but anyway, we don't want to get into that too much.
Well, for sake of easeability, anti-Semitic is an easy term because people understand what I'm trying to say. No? You don't believe that?
It wasn't racial. Anti-Semitism, as it comes out of like Nazi Germany, it's racial. It's like this: there's a superior race and there's an inferior race, and there's nothing you could do about it. If you're, that was the world view, and so the anti-Semitism has this idea where there's a correct race or a good race, and then an inferior race.
I get what you're saying. You're saying.
So it wasn't racial; it was theological.
But to the point where they thought violence should be done to the people who held to Judaism. Correct?
I don't know about. I don't know. I'd have to look at sources about violence.
Okay.
Do you mean violence against Jews advocated?
Yes.
By the church fathers?
Yes, that's what I mean.
Like before Chrysostom?
Yeah, I'm talking like third century.
Okay, well, 3rd, 4th century, maybe you start to see that sort of thing.
Okay,
I would.
But you still okay. So I guess the point is that you.
But you got it both ways, because in the Babylonian Talmud they're talking about all the disciples of Yeshua that they killed.
Granted, okay, and that's another point is that the writers of the Talmud, what are they doing? First of all, they don't believe in the Messiah. They reject the Messiah, violently reject the Messiah. First of all, second of all, they write a lot of the Talmud in response to Christianity. A lot of the stories that people are so prone to pull out of the Talmud. Messianics. This is one thing that baffles my mind. A lot of Messianics, I shouldn't make blanket statements. A lot of Messianics don't realize that a lot of that some of the stories in the Talmud that they use in their teaching and whatnot are actually in response to Christianity. They're trying to disparage Yeshua and Christianity. And so, it's impossible to say whether or not the church fathers are better or greater than the writers of the Talmud in terms of faith in Yeshua. Absolutely, the church fathers were greater. In terms of love of God, well, no. The people who wrote the rabbis who wrote the Talmud certainly loved God, at least the God that they were worshiping. They rejected Yeshua, so what does that mean? In terms of their writings themselves, I think that the church fathers did wonderful, amazing things for the faith. They worked out theological issues that we still stand on today. And I think the rabbis did wonderful things for the community, for the Jewish community, as well as preserving something that we absolutely benefit from as believers today. We can look at the Jewish communities of the 6th century AD, and we can better understand. We can have a glimpse into history, and we can learn from them. There's great wisdom in many of the writings. They're not all true. What do you think, Rob?
I think we're in a situation where it's like all the books are open. There's nothing to hide. We can see what all the early church fathers wrote. We can see what all the rabbis were writing or taught. And we're in a position to go through and look at history, put everything in a timeline, see how ideas developed, and then we can weigh them against what we know to be true from the gospel. And we can try to be just in our assessments, so that we're not going to skew the story in favor of the church fathers. We're not going to skew the story in favor of the rabbis. We're just going to let it be what it is, and be good stewards of the history and learn from it. That's what we need to do. Not this. Like, there was one post about oral Torah, and people because Dr. Brown, I guess, had a caller that asked about oral Torah. And, one person's like, oh, he's so wrong. We need the oral Torah because everybody, the problem with Messianics is they don't want to be accountable to anybody. And the oral Torah goes all the way back to Sinai. And I'm like, this guy does not know what he's talking about. He's bought and consumed and swallowed and painted his room with rabbinic notion of history.
There's only one. Go ahead. Finish.
He's just his whole worldview is skewed now in a way that he doesn't even ever need to learn Hebrew. He doesn't even need to learn the scriptures, because he's on board with this myth called oral Torah.
See, I think that there is oral Torah that goes all the way back to Sinai and before, and that oral Torah is the apostolic scriptures. The truth contained within the apostolic scriptures is taught within the Torah.
Okay, he doesn't mean it that way.
I know he doesn't, but
he's talking rabbinic.
I'm constantly trying to advocate this idea that when we as Messianics talk about oral Torah, what we should be talking about is the oral Torah that was written down from Yeshua and his disciples, which is the apostolic scriptures, which is the New Testament. That goes all the way back to Sinai. The truth's held within there, and I know that we're on the same page here, Rob, but I want people to start thinking, when people say our sages, that really ticks me off. When they're talking about the Talmudic rabbis, those aren't our sages. They rejected our Messiah. They rejected the Rebbe. They rejected the true Rebbe, the true Messiah. Our sages are the sages from the apostolic scriptures. Paul, John, Matthew, Luke, these are our sages. When we say our sages, we should automatically be following that up with a reference to either the Tanakh or the Apostolic Scriptures, not to something in the Talmud or the Mishnah. When it comes to the Church Fathers and when it comes to rabbinic writings, look, I know that there's a huge push from the Messianic movement against the so-called Church Fathers. Okay, I get it. At the same time, what these Messianics who push so hard against the Church Fathers don't realize is that they owe a great debt to these Church Fathers. Some of the theologies that have been worked out by the Church Fathers, we still hold today. And many Messianics are trying to reject them, but you know what? What happens? Their faith falls apart when that happens, when they reject those truths. They dealt with the text of the Apostolic Scriptures.
They preserved the canon. Yeah, they're preserving the text
Yeah.
for us. I mean, if anything, we owe that.